Ladies and gentlemen, the Shroud of Turin is back, and I'll be right back. Well, hey there, Gracious Gang. It's Mike from thegraciousguest.org here on the Gracious Guest Show, where we're living with wonder and awe in any way we can, whether it's opening up wider to any sort of inspiration that might be coming to us through great literature, great movies, great conversations. Really, what this channel is all about is showcasing wonder and awe, getting beyond this nonsense, materialistic, reductionistic, relativistic nonsense that tells us that we're all just basically electric meat puppets going around without any kind of actual meaning, any kind of actual destiny or purpose, and that's an attitude we see all over the place today, and it's just not true. There's nothing there. There's no there. There's no real, authentic human experience there, and so any kid, who's basically entering into an experience of profound wonder and awe just by stargazing or paying attention to beautiful things in nature that make them ask all kinds of questions. Where did this come from? Why is this like this? Where do we come from? What does my life mean? As you get a little bit older and start thinking more profoundly about these questions are important, and the more we pursue them, the more questions we discover that we have. The more the universe opens up to wider and wider vistas, the more opportunities we find for meaningful relationship with one another and ultimately with God himself. And so that's some of the things that we are open to here on the Gracious Guest Show. Today we're returning to a very important topic, the Shroud of Turin. Before we do that, click that subscribe button, that like button, that what else we got there? Share this far and wide. Share the video. Make sure that you also share the podcast if you're listening to this, the audio version. And however you're coming to the show, thank you so much, and please spread the word. Reviews are great too. If you could leave some good reviews, some good comments, anything that would help get this content out far and wide, I really appreciate it. So jumping right in here today, we are spotlighting Let Your Light Shine Art. Let Your Light Shine Art is a beautiful website with some really, really awesome little night lights of the Shroud of Turin. I don't know if you can see this very well. I'm going to hold it up to the camera and see how it's difficult to get it. But there you can see the face from the shroud right there in this little frame. If you're listening, you just have to use your imagination and click the link. What's so cool is I can't really do it right here. I'm going to try this out. I was trying this earlier. Let's see if it works. I'm going to attempt something. Oh, wait, there. It's kind of working. So you'll see the face of the shroud appear a little bit if I shine this light. And you can't quite get the full effect without actually getting one of these. Totally get it. Wonderful stocking stuffer if you can get it before the Christmas season. But you just kind of just plug it in, and it's light sensitive basically. So if in the darkness you turn the bathroom light off, it lights up with a projection, a perfect three-dimensional projection of the face on the shroud using the G-code information embedded within the original image itself. And we're going to get into all of that with my guests in just a minute. But for now, this work goes back to Kevin E. Moran, who was an engineer, research and development, really amazing man from Belmont, North Carolina, who passed away a number of years ago, 2 years ago at the time of this recording. And Mr. Moran became fascinated with the Shroud of Turin when he first read about it in the late 1970s. All the research, the STURP project, right, the Shroud of Turin research project, and all that they were doing. And then he was able, over the years, to engage with those folks and to do his own research, and brought a lot of his engineering and optics background to bear on studying the image, the three-dimensional properties of the image, and that eventually led into the printing and the reproduction of different from statues to this particular nightlight project, all sorts of different ways of trying to turn this into a three-dimensional representation of the image on the shroud. Pretty awesome stuff. And his daughters are carrying on his legacy, and I'm joined by them today. So if Kevin E. Moran is definitely a shroud enthusiast, God rest his soul, his daughters also are going to be joining me here now. So please welcome my guests, Kevin E. Moran's daughters, Julie and Sheila. Check it out. All right, and I have right now with me two daughters of Kevin E. Moran, who's the shroud enthusiast in this case, and they have a fascinating story to tell, a lot to share with us. It's one that can really help all of our viewers and listeners out here. And first of all, I wanted to mention here that it's to give the most intriguing gift under the Christmas tree. Also, if you can pull this off in time, and also to be remembered for the most unique, mysterious, definitely practical and affordable gift under the Christmas tree. So we've got a couple, things we can hit on here. But joining me are Julie Moran Medearis from Longmont, Colorado. Hello, Julie.
Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Very, very good. And last but certainly not least, Julie's sister Sheila Moran Stevens, who's in Aiken, South Carolina. Is that right?
Yes. Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you both so much. And this is just exciting. We have a lot we can cover here, but I just wanted to start by jumping in here. So, Julie, you're the third of seven. Is that right?
That's correct. I got 4 brothers and 2 sisters. We are 7. Our dad, yes, and our dad was an engineer, Kevin E. Moran, but yet he didn't finish college, so that kind of crept up on him later on. But he was very smart, but he just didn't finish college. He had a scholarship and everything for Fournier College in Chicago, but the classroom was just not where he was supposed to be learning. He was one of the guys who learned better by doing.
Right.
So
it wasn't the best atmosphere for learning, for in his case at least. So what was it like growing up with him as dad? Being on the Stirp team, and even of course before that too.
Well, yes. He first of all, we were brought up Catholic, and in fact, he would call himself. Well, he was from the Catholic ghettos of Chicago. He'd call it, how they play outside, etc. His Catholic faith was important to him. He married my mom right out of college. She finished college. That was always a fun topic.
Okay. Did she tease him about that? No.
Actually, he teased just us. Okay. Your mother's smarter than me, which we knew he was the smart. He was very smart. He was a genius. But how was growing up with him? His faith was strong, but it was the dinner table that I remember the most. It was the 7 of us around the dinner table, and Dad would come home bringing something that he had done that day, whether it was anywhere from a Venus flytrap plant that we got to see firsthand, but it was more than just hamburger feeding, at the dinner table to your plant. It was the plant was hooked up to a machine with wires, and we were able to see possible feelings, of the plant. And of course it wasn't feelings, but he had done something like that.
Right.
Another time he brought, somehow he had these, I think it was called levitating water. Droplets of water would come down in a strobe light, and it was just fascinating. It looked like it was, just standing there. But all of these things at the dinner table were normal to us. But as I grew up, I realized this is not a normal dinner time, with the typical family. First of all, we did sit down and eat as a family. So, Sheila, do you have any other memories?
I do. I remember the parabolic mirrors. Remember the parabolic mirrors? And he'd put the little fly down there, and it looked like the fly was sitting on top. So we all got a lesson in parabolic optics.
That sounds like a pretty fun dinner to be part of, for sure.
It paid off later, yes.
Yeah. Well, your science projects were always kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Dad, can you tell me what I should do for my science project? And he'd go into a whole menagerie, and I'm like, no, what about this, the pepper in the water in the pie dish with the soap? Can you explain that? So that's a real simple one. And he'd go off.
Oh, my gosh.
But
anyway. Well, and I think you well, and I don't want to get ahead of it here, actually, because I did want to ask, Sheila, as far as with this kind of some of the Shroud background, because I think it kind of goes off what Julie was saying about your dad and his sort of the Renaissance man. I think you used the phrase here. So do you want to maybe kind of approach how he got involved with the project in the first place with just some of that background on him and his interests?
Sure. The Shroud of Turin piqued his interest early on in the early 80s. At that time, I was in high school. I wasn't interested. I was a high school student. But he got drawn in for his knowledge of optics, and that is where he specialized. Was he brought to the research table his optical image. They were trying to get to the bottom of the image formation. So while he was
the shroud image, just specifically,
the shroud image,
right? Because that's just for anyone who might not be 100% familiar. I'm sure they probably are. If they're watching this video, they're interested and probably know at least something about the shroud. But that the STURP or the Shroud of Turin research project wasn't. Am I correct in saying that their sort of number one mission was to attempt to discover precisely how that image was produced? Is that a fair way of putting it?
I think there was probably more research, but yes, the image is, of course, biggest, but there were also, the stains, the tears, and other things.
Sure. Okay. Yep. Just wanted to check. Yeah. So that was his from an optics standpoint. That was his particular kind of cup of tea with that.
That was his expertise. That's what he brought to the table. Yes.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did he? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
Well, I was just going to mention, our dad built a car when he was 19. He ended up always being fascinated by something out there. The science magazine was part of his repertoire. So when the shroud, now I think a lot of us learned about the shroud in the 70s when the STURP project went over there in 1978.
Right.
And more things. So, but it was definitely in that decade that he learned about it. And at that point, he was really hooked. He was like, could this really be the face of Christ? He thought it peculiar that such a relic existed and it could be examined by scientists. That blew his mind.
Sure. Well, and what an incredible opportunity that I know not everybody was necessarily enthusiastic about letting that happen either. So it was a tremendous opportunity. And I was interested in some of the notes that you sent over about once he really sort of got hooked. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that interest started to manifest itself around the home? I thought that was just so cool.
I'll start, but Sheila actually lived in the house mostly. But by the time we moved to Belmont, North Carolina, down there, it was a huge house, and he really used every room of it. I mean, it started out small, but in the living room there was a huge light box with a life-size replica of the shroud with the light flowing behind it. And the dining room was 3D printers or mold-making materials. In the family room there were other things, the shroud statues, as shroud images and litter. It just littered the whole house, and it challenged our mother's decorating. Go ahead, Sheila.
Yeah, he did. He if he brought a piece of equipment home that he thought might help, it would sit in the corner. If there were tools that he thought would help, or magazines or periodicals, pre-internet, you had to make phone calls and purchase books. He'd send away for items, Sure. So it just built all over.
And eventually people would learn about, hey, over there in that Belmont house, that guy, you should really get that guy to come to your church and talk about this. This is, you won't believe what's in his house type thing. And so each time
that reputation.
Well, so what kind of stuff would he bring for those presentations? Like, how would he set that up?
He would offer. He had a little pamphlet we put together one time because he had so many things to offer. He had PowerPoint slides that he would put up, or a little slide, film strip or what have you. He did have a statue from Isabel Piczac that he would use to demonstrate the possible final position that the image of the body was in at the time the image was flashed onto the cloth. He would have pictures. He would have lenticular. He had a giant lenticular photo. Those types of things. He did have a model whip that he would show people. So he had the show and tell items.
Awesome.
He also had a VPA analyzer.
Yes, I wondered when
And
that would come. Yeah, because I'm
sorry, well, he didn't
I'm very
always drag
interested in
that
that.
out.
Yeah.
The VPA analyzer is an older piece of equipment. It was created back in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was used primarily by government and military corporations they would use it for mapping. They used it for capturing satellite images and mapping. It was a black and white,
Mm-hmm.
eight spectrum, eight of the grayscale spectrum. And so that was what the original purpose of the VPN analyzer for was, among other things. But there weren't very many created, about 150 or so. And so my dad, having worked in the optical industry, he worked for Kodak and Aranca Electronics and some other companies. And he met a gentleman who had worked for the original company and helped Dad obtain his very own VPA analyzer. So he would take that. He would take that to very limited, because it's an older piece of equipment, doesn't travel real well. But that would allow one to see the actual three-dimensional properties that are found in the cloth, because the
Sure.
cloth is a black and white image and it's full of grayscale.
Right.
So. And that was a really neat educational tool. It was an older analyzer. It's not digital. It's analog. You cannot fudge analog out there.
Right.
I remember.
And
Not like today's. You can Photoshop anything digital,
Right.
but not this.
And if I'm not mistaken here, the original oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name now. Secundo Pia, right, that took the first photograph. And so
Photographer.
and if I understand the story correctly, when he's basically producing the final image, he is the first to come to this incredible realization that the image on the shroud, which is fairly faint, if you see a photo or you see an actual depiction of it, you have this linen shroud, you have this kind of very light brownish kind of, like, you can see the shape, the outline of a man, but when you photo negative basically switch it, if I'm not mistaken, that's when you realize that the image as you see it in person is a negative, basically.
That's correct.
Of this whatever produced this image on the cloth. And when you reverse that, you get all that dimension, you get all of that those features that really sort of pop. And that was the first time we really ever saw that. So
That's
I would
correct.
point out, for those who we keep addressing the hoax, claims through most of these videos that we put out. At some point they come up, but of course, that's one of those questions. How do you pull that off if photography is not going to be invented for, like all the things you'd have to think about? But could you walk us through a little bit with the VP8 here, a little bit more in detail, or any way you might want to approach just how profound what your dad and the team ended up discovering with those 3D properties, of looking at the shroud itself and seeing something they didn't expect to see?
Sure. When Dad did get involved later on, it was 1978 that Eric Jumper and John Jackson from the U.S. Air Force first discovered. They're the ones that were using the VPA. They're the ones that thought, let's do this. So they are actually the ones who turned the VPA on the image on the shroud, which you're correct, is a photo negative. It's a photo negative in the naked eye. And they are the ones that discovered. So what that means is the image has something like a G code embedded in it. Okay, and G code it's something that MIT came up with in the 50s. It's kind of the instructions, if you will, for a machine to build or cut. It's north, south, XYZ.
Okay.
You're going to go left to right, front to back, up and down. So the fact that this 1,000-year-old, it doesn't matter, before photography,
right? Yeah.
has these properties in this two-dimensional picture on this two-dimensional cloth, is you cannot paint that.
Right.
You can't paint that. You can't.
It's way too bizarre. So in other words,
Yes.
this image that appears two-dimensional has consistent three-dimensional properties all across it.
It does.
And nothing else on the cloth. Like
It does.
It's not scorch marks. It's not paint. It's not chemical. It's not all the things we've talked about before, and we'll continue to bring up on any future shroud-related stuff, the things that they have determined that have not produced the image, but within that list, is this sort of additionally interesting data about the three-dimensional properties of the image itself.
I'll give you an example, and I don't have a picture in front of me, but if you take an actual picture of the shroud and you take an artist and he takes black and white ink and he does an exact brushstroke for brushstroke, identical side by side looking image of what it would be, it's not going to have the same three-dimensionality as the actual image on the shroud. It'll look the same to our naked eye, but it will not have the same features.
So it can't be faked. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Julie.
Well, I think that's the essence. When leaving North Carolina, having a family, coming back and seeing all the work that Dad was continuing to do there in the house. He would have the VP8 out there. He'd put a picture of my children under the camera, and it was distorted. It was, unfortunately we can't show it here, but then you put the shroud, and at first my mind couldn't really understand that, because we're used to, like you said, Adobe Photoshop, you can do anything with photos.
Right, yeah.
But his mind, he was from the set, hey, no, there's no getting around this. There's no other image in the world that can do this that we have found.
If you visit our website at letyourlightshineart.com, there are some videos that you could click on, and it will show you the animation of the VP8. It will show you what I'm trying to describe. I think there's a link on there too that has the photo that Julie's talking about. You take a regular photo of somebody.
I think I did see that on there. Yeah, you could see the distortion on it. Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask you, unless there's something else you wanted to mention before I do, but because I think this is a nice segue to you have this profound skill set and just very well, I can call him a genius. I didn't know him. You did. You said, but you have this keen intellect, this passion, this interest, this man who wants so very much to apply these gifts that God has given him, and seems to enjoy himself along the way, and then you marry that with this incredible mystery for the ages, and then near the end of his life, this passion for developing if you want to tell the story here, so I don't ruin anything, but wasn't necessarily something he planned on having become what it's become, and so this story is just beautiful to hear.
It wasn't, and you're right. He was very, very much the engineer his entire life. Sometimes his talks to the laymen at church, sometimes you kind of had to reel him back a little. He'd get out there with all the optical, and everybody's eyes would get really big, and they're like, okay. But he was approached because of his expertise, because of his reputation now in the international community. He was approached in late 2015 by a group of folks from a Chinese museum, and they knew that he had the information about the three-dimensional properties. They wanted to provide their guests at the museum a souvenir, if you will, a takeaway from their museum of the Shroud, and that was going to be their museum was of the Shroud of Turin. They were also promoting Christianity, so they came to Dad to get this solution. Well, Dad had the knowledge. What he didn't have was today's technology skills with 3D printers, okay? So while he held many patents, one of them actually even on inkjet, he was not super familiar with the 3D printers that were available readily today. So we found a young man, and the young man came, and he brought his skills to the table, combined them with my father's engineering skills, and they were able to pull that G-code out, turn it into a file necessary to print on a 3D printer, and lo and behold, before them was the 3D printed face of Christ. It was very, very awe-inspiring. I still get goosebumps on my arms when I talk about it. I'm getting them now. Just to see the Lord's face, it's amazing. It's
What was your
amazing.
first reaction to it, Julie? Did you have the same experience?
I did because what Let Your Light Shine art does is, I don't, I'm jumping ahead now too, but take that technology and put it into an image and put the light behind it. So it's very obscure. When you look at a night light from Let Your Light Shine art, it's very obscure. What am I looking at? I don't
I'm gonna hold
understand.
mine up here because
And
I brought it. I brought it
yeah,
along.
and yet when you put a light behind it, when you
Yeah.
flip on that light, um, it's all of a sudden a very serene face
Yeah.
and peaceful face,
Yeah.
and when you realize that that is likely the face that Segunda Pia saw in 1898 when he developed that film. Um, you do get chills. You get, this is a photograph of Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that hit Dad. I think
Mm-hmm.
the Chinese didn't end up running with the program, but when Dad realized that he was holding and looking at, I think when he
Right.
realized what he'd produced, and he
Huh.
wanted to share that. He wanted everyone else to have that feeling. He wanted them to know he is real. He was here. He was real, and that cloth is not a fake.
And so in other words, what we have here is, and again, it doesn't show up very well on the camera there. I'm going to try it again from this angle. Oh, there you go. You can see it a little bit
There
better
we
there.
go.
But see, it's kind of it's inverted in a sense, right? And then when you turn it on, it's I just have to describe it now, but you get this sort of pop, and I can actually I can put in at this point in the video here. I'll just put in a little zoom in of it real quick for them to see. But you see this just like you said, this serene, this 3D, and it appears to be rising off, the surface inside the little frame, which was so beautiful. And just a really, I know for us at our house, it's been a very nice addition. And it was funny. This particular one was sent to me by friend of the show and a former and maybe future guest Martha May, whose video is just rocking it right now on the Sidarium and the Shroud together. So she sent this to me, but I don't know, and I didn't want to jump ahead more here, but was there anything else that either of you wanted to speak about as far as, like, I know you talked about, how did you say her name? Isabel?
Oh,
Isabel Pixak. Yeah,
Pixak.
Isabel
Oh,
Pixak.
Pixak. Okay,
Yes.
from Hungary. Yeah, because that was an interesting thing. I don't want to skip over.
It
You
is.
know, yeah. How did that come
And
about, or what
that
all?
is exactly how we met Martha, and Martha met us.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
in the early 2000s, again, Isabel Pixak was a physicist. She was also an artist, internationally renowned. She had moved to the United States with her family,
Sure.
and it
From
was just
Hungary,
her
correct?
from
I think.
Hungary. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so she also got involved in the image formation. So she was also part of that scientific shroud community.
Mm.
She had sculpted a statue because, again, I don't have the shroud in front of me, but if you look at the image on the shroud, there is no distortion of the man's body.
Right.
Okay, if you were to lay a cloth across my face, it would be, distorted and down my thing.
Right.
So that was another puzzle piece. And
Right.
Isabel, and so Isabel had some theories. I'm an artist, not an engineer, so I can't describe her theories, but she basically sculpted a statue of her image of the body at the time of resurrection, in which they believe the image was burned onto the cloth.
Mm-hmm.
And so she took that statue and she asked Dad to replicate it. So many people had asked her for it, I think. And so she gave him the statue. He made a mold out of it and was asked to make sure that this could be available to the education community, because she didn't want it to end with just her statue. She wanted others
Right.
to see it so that we could take this to the community and to those who want to learn more.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So he ended up with the mold, and he produced many statues and got them to the people who were interested. Martha was one of them. So, yeah.
That's
He
awesome.
was doing that right up until the end.
Well, and what was
literally.
and I'm just curious because I think you mentioned this before too, the data, and this could be a whole show probably in and of itself, but I'm just curious if there's a short version of it, at least with what they think about the positioning of the body, because I'm not entirely clear on that. That's kind of an interesting, because in the paper you sent too that he had put together about the positioning of the body at that moment, I'm just trying to imagine that.
Well, I think that was more Isabel than Dad
Okay.
as far as the position of the body. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I think that was Isabel more than Dad about
Oh, I
the
see.
position of the body. She was the one that had calculated the distance, based on the black and white.
Right.
They did their measurements. Again, Sheila is an artist, not an engineer. So they kind of back engineered off of the image.
Okay.
How far the distance. Remember, black and white can tell us the distance of things. So,
Sure.
that was so.
And the distance,
I'm sure
when you say distance, you mean from any particular part of the
cloth.
body to the cloth? Because like you said, again,
Correct.
that image, like if you lay a cloth over my face, like this part under my nose is going to be farther away from the cloth than the tip of my nose is, because it's not, I'm not flat.
Right.
I have features.
Right. You're not going to see my face. You're going to see a blur
Right.
of my face.
But what we see on the
that
image,
is not what you see.
like the image,
His
it's not
face.
theory. The thing we have, I'm looking it up on my wall here. It's because it always just, I feel like he's looking at me. Well, he is. Maybe
He
through.
is.
So
He is.
yeah, but
He is.
yeah.
I think that's a big part of this. I'd like to tell the story about kind of how the whole nightlight thing started.
Please, yeah.
Because it was Sheila, it was Dad, they were all out here for a wedding in Colorado. They had gone home and they were trying to make a gift for the friends of ours that they had used their house. Anyway, to make this gift, they were playing around with that relief. Much of the time, if I am correct, Sheila, they were trying to make it positive, like make a face out of it. The nose would be higher than the cheeks. But at the same time, then someone made the relief go the other way, and then they put the light behind it. Go ahead, Sheila.
Oh, okay.
That's correct. We just inverted the image so that when the light shines behind it, again, like the negative on the cloth, we made the negative of the print. So when the light's behind it, you see the face.
Okay, so the light itself reverses the sort of structuring of the, because that's, again, you can't really see it through this video camera as well, but there's all these these little reliefs and everything. Everything is sort of it's like a three-dimensional photo negative, essentially.
It's a three-dimensional photo negative. When you're looking at that piece of plastic in the frame there, it's exactly like looking at the image on the shroud. When you put the light behind it, it's like that moment the film was developed.
Because I think,
face.
see, I still remember real photo negatives. None of my students know what I'm talking about. Now they know that from like the negative filter you can put on, which achieves the same basic thing. But I still remember, you get the pictures back from the Photoshop and you have a little film strip and you hold it up and you're like, wow, I look weird because I'm backwards, And so that same idea of the play of everything your eye is used to seeing, dark is light and light is dark, and there's only so much your brain can do with that. So it's interesting because it's the same sort of thing, but instead of the light differences or the darks and the lights and all that, it's the physicality of the actual insert in here where it's completely reversed. And so it's pretty brilliant. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's what we wanted to do. So we put it in a picture frame, sent it to Julie, and we thought, do you think they'll like this? And that's how it was born.
Wow.
That's how it was born. We realized what an unusual and unique item to have in your possession. Yeah. A reincarnation, if you will, of the moment the film was developed. Sure. There's his face.
Well, and how did the whole, like, as far as the actual, like the website, like actually the production phase, like the whole plan of making this something that was, was there a phase where you were thinking of just making it for friends and family, or how did that whole development into the actual sales piece work here in the shop, the online store, and everything?
Julie,
yeah,
that's probably
well, I go home to North Carolina in once or twice a year, and again, there would be more on the dining room table, or there would be more. I'm like, Dad, these are really good. What are you guys going to? Oh, well, Sheila's figuring out the frames, or Sheila's got, and it's fun because Sheila had the creativity, and then Dad was just trying to get the word out. He really loves that this can be a proof or a physical part of being a fifth gospel. He would call it the fifth
Right.
gospel.
I was struck
And
by that. Yeah.
I just love that because it is, and he lived that. His life, when he devoted so much time to these projects around the Shroud of Turin, his life showed that. And he said, if we can make more people understand what has gone on here, that this is so miraculous, a
Right.
light or an image. It started with the image. So when Sheila, I guess, was in the house at one point, just kind of playing around and saying, well, so I know I brought friends into the house and they said, well, how much for one of these little things, And so, yeah, they were kind of coming off the, what do I want to call it?
The printer.
The printer, yeah.
The flying off the cuff.
Oh, I'd like one of those. I'd like one of those. And so we knew there was something there. And as we've gotten testimonials, even in the last year, I mean, they've gone into whether it's the hall going down, just allowing a light to, give you light in the middle of the darkness, but it's also given children. I mean, I guess some of my friends have it for their children's bedroom, and it just gives them peace. Oh, when they look at Jesus, when they look at the face and the face, there are Psalms out there that talk about, Lord, let your face shine upon us.
Yeah.
And this whole idea with the light and Christ's face from the Shroud of Turin, the photograph that we have today, it's a physical part. It's beautiful. What let your light shine art does.
No words needed. Dad, that's what Dad loved about it most. No words were needed. It's a multi-national, multi-age. Little children know that's Jesus's face.
Yeah, and it's so amazing because it's just I mean it's so sacramental. I would say in like a lowercase s maybe sense, which a lot of people don't know that I forget which paragraph it's in the Catechism. There's a really beautiful coverage of this in the Catechism of the Catholic Church about the sacramental. What's what I want to say here? The sacramental approach and sort of just sensibility maybe that God has, where really the whole universe, you could say in a sense, is sacramental in that it's something tangible that communicates something intangible, and I think it's so incredible that to me it makes total sense why this human need to connect, to have some kind of, I mean, we're not just spirits, trapped. I can't stand that bumper sticker that says we're something like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. No, no. Like the body is good, matter is good. That's a Gnostic thing, right? We have to fight that. It's still with us. But this beauty that God, this scandal almost, right? That God takes on a body where he sweats and he sleeps and he bleeds and he smells bad, and it's still as scandalous today, I think, than that claim than it was back then. And I think this is a reminder of that, where when you want to spiritualize Jesus all the time, here he is, bloody, ripped apart, dead, just the violence of it, but also the peace of it, the humanity of God. I mean, how is that possible? And so I love that it raises more questions than it answers.
It's also to me, it has really brought my faith back around. Again, I haven't always been where I needed to be. And
who has
this project, right,
Yeah.
right. This project with Dad, again, he was helping me, I was helping him, He's gone now, but we have to continue this because this project, it's more than just, selling a nightlight. Really want to share this with even today's generation. You were talking about your students, and you're right. This is more than just my spirituality or a spirit here having a human experience. This man was real. This man was here. We tortured him. It was horrible. And what he gave up for us is just unimaginable. Today's generation, and it's just true. We've gotten further away. Our younger generation is more technologically savvy. This is a technological tool, if you will, to show them, you know what, your parents aren't talking out the side of their mouth. He was real. This proves it.
Yeah.
They grew up with photoshopped copies of models on magazine covers. They never even saw pimples or blemishes.
Right.
Of course, that's the world they grew up in. This is real. This is real. This is analog. It's not changeable.
Yep.
It's in that cloth. We didn't paint it on there. The people 2,000 years ago didn't paint it on there. 3D graphic artists today cannot replicate this technique.
That's why it's one of the most famous. I love, by the way, I have my The Chosen sweatshirt here, which I'm always sporting, but I love that show, and I know a lot of people watching this have seen at least some of it. But for me, one of the most striking moments that so easily could have been missed is in one of the early episodes. I think it's the episode where then he's with the kids the whole way through, which is such a beautiful episode. But at the beginning, when it's just showing a day in the life of Jesus at his little kind of camp there, and he's working and stuff, there's one just very brief part where he's got a gash on his wrist or somewhere from just, hard work, and he's dressing the wound. And it just, I kept rewinding it because I'm like, hold on a minute here. I'm like, wait a minute. There's that's incredibly profound. It's like, you don't need to become a human. I'm like praying it as I'm watching it. So you don't need to become a human. You don't need to create anything in the first place. You certainly don't need to let yourself get cut. And if you do, just heal it. But that's the thing is, and I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Like if he went all in, not a single stripe that he received during the crucifixion was something he had to let happen, but he chose it anyway. And he didn't heal him. So physician, heal yourself, and he doesn't do it, So that's just, gosh, it means so much.
Don't you think it's fascinating, though, right now in time, that we are so technologically, abundant, and there's been lots of people turning their back on God. That wouldn't it be interesting? We are such a material society. We don't think it's real unless we see, touch, feel, hear it. And here it is, there's a cloth with this image that has this three-dimensional property to it. No one can truly mimic or recreate. And here now, here's, again, I go back to the photograph. Here's something tangible that the young people today can actually touch.
Right.
And it's more like the Thomas thing. Hey, touch my wounds, right? Here, touch me. This is what. And the 3D
and Jesus says that it's better to not have to have that, but he doesn't say no. He says, Thomas, come here, do it.
Do it.
That's right. I just love that it's and that it goes back to that fifth gospel. It is material that we can grasp onto. Now, I myself is. I don't know. I did the term paper back in high school on the Shroud of Turin, and oh my gosh, that just had me hooked back then. When I really put my head and mind into it, and it furthered my faith at that point too. But right now, as people have come in and said, "What is this? What is this?" Could it actually be an evangelical tool today? That's, I think, where my dad was.
Yeah.
He was like, no. I mean, it would overwhelm him at times, where the Holy Spirit would just really pour on him.
Sure.
And he'd be, how am I the one in the middle of all this? How am I doing this? My gosh, God has given me this mission to do. And that's where, again, I look at Sheila and all that she's done out there, and I say, oh, how can I help Sheila? And I love that Sheila has a story herself that, hey, you know what? It's even later in life, it's furthered my faith. So.
Wow. Yeah, and it's just it's so incredible how that humility that you mentioned, that he, and when did he pass away? Was it 27?
He passed away in March of 2019.
19. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was more recent.
2 years.
He was tight right up into
Okay.
the end. He had all his faculties, and we lost him at the end of March.
Sure.
He had his full faculties about. In fact, he gave one of his last Shroud talks at his home on February 17th, like weeks before he left. We had called in hospice because, the physical body does fail you. So, and even with hospice, the different nurses that would come in and the different neighbors and friends that would visit him, he literally was selling nightlights from his deathbed. See, you got one of these. He did not stop until his body stopped.
Well, and I have no doubt there was, with that amount of dedication, I have no doubt that, the Lord coming for him was very recognizable. Certainly,
Yes. Yes.
As one of my friends said on her card to me, said, "Oh, your dad, for all the times that he saw the face of Christ on the shroud, he's now seeing, hopefully the face of Christ in heaven."
Yeah.
And that just really...
And he's got his answers. He's got his answers. All those engineering questions he
You go through the veil, you're like, okay, let's do this. Let's Well, and I do think, and again, this could be a whole, I'll just mention this maybe in passing or see if you have any thoughts on this in general, but it could open up a whole can of worms for a whole other show. But when you said about the evangelical, the evangelical aspect of it,
nature, yeah.
It's often the case, and I'm not blasting anybody because I think it's definitely coming from a slightly different perspective. So I kind of understand this, but the concern that sometimes people have about, those of us who do believe that the shroud is authentic, and spend this much time and say the things that we've been saying here today, that might think that we're being idolatrous or worshiping a cloth or something like that. And clearly that's not what we're doing. But I would just ask you maybe if you had any thought just on that, or what your short sort of answer would be to maybe how you approach, the distinction here.
Yeah. I've always heard, actually, I don't know if it was Dad or somebody else that might have said it, but the shroud certainly doesn't explain to you, or give you faith. The shroud does not give you faith. It's a gift from God.
Right.
But what the Shroud of Turin can and has done for so many has really furthered that faith and really honed it in, fine-tuned it in, just like you're dialing on a VP8 image analyzer, fine-tuning all the fuzziness out and making it clearer.
Right.
So the image can further it, but at the same time, agnostics, atheists have looked and worked on the Shroud of Turin before and kind of come away going, "Oh my gosh, what? Wait a minute. Maybe I better take a second look at this whole thing about Jesus Christ."
It's like it's a gateway or a bullhorn, or just, it's like it's an instrument in the hands of the Lord, is kind of how I look at it.
I do too. And that's what I was going to say. It's more of an instrument for me because the shroud was here before I was ever even born. It's been through its own history, its own excitement, wars and hiding and families and on display and weddings and non-weddings and fires. And, so the shroud has had its place in history for reasons that you and I, it's not for you and I to know. God has a plan. He's had a plan this whole time. So when people look at me and say, "Are you worshiping a cloth?" No, I'm not worshiping a cloth. I'm acknowledging that God gave this message of this technology. For me, it's the technology. God put this 3D property has been sitting in this cloth for 2,000 years. It's now showing its face, literally. It's in the 70s here towards the end, because it was supposed to. So it's a tool. And you said the word tool. I believe it's a tool. I believe it's a tool from God. And that's what I'm doing. I'm using the tool.
And we continue to pursue, anytime we do a shroud related, I have so many different things on this particular channel I love to pursue. We're actually going to be doing everything. I've got interviews coming up soon, everything from Eucharistic miracles to incorruptibles and apparitions. Like, it's just I think there's a real thirst and desire for that, the unexplainable stuff, right? Or the more curious, that captures people's attention, especially when there's so much competition in the immediate sense-pleasing kind of media stuff, right? You get this. I'm never going to be up against like some really really like popular meme that's going around or something like that on YouTube, but the staying power of this thing, like no one's got answers. The more questions they ask, the more questions they come away with, and that invitation to this encounter with the face of the Lord himself, and the questions that might open in your own life is kind of what this is all about, I think, from my perspective.
I think, again, dealing with what Sheila just said, the timing is right. Mm-hmm. Even through this pandemic,
sure,
the timing is right, because as you plug in what's a very practical light in your hallway or bathroom or kitchen or whatever, it's shining, but it's also giving hope.
Yeah.
Where a lot of hope needs to be found today. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I go back and I look at this as just a very unique gift for the Advent season.
Sure.
Shining a light in the darkness, in the present darkness.
Well, and I definitely will be, we'll have the link will be posted clearly. I'm going to have all that in the show notes and everything for everybody, and I'll mention it too, at the closeout as well. But I just want to, we're coming close to the end here. I didn't want to cut you off or anything. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, just kind of in closing, or just encouragement, or last minute thoughts on the shroud, the shroud night light, whatever you'd like?
I'll just say that I would encourage those who have any kind of questions to, the nightlight is exactly what Julie said. It's practical. We all need a little light in the house, getting up in the morning. It does provide that reflection and a meditation. There are no words. So what you see is what you make of it. What it invokes in you, Mike, and what it invokes in Julie, and what it invokes in me. It's going to be very different, but very similar. It's a tool, and I just would hope that folks would give it an opportunity to see what it could evoke in them.
And my last little bit of inspiration came just this morning from a text from some friends of mine. This Advent is a time of waiting. It's also a time to kind of throw the hubbub, push it away and just kind of reflect and enter into your mind's inner chamber. And it talked about just simply, I seek you, Lord. I seek your face, Lord, I desire. That just struck out at me this morning at the end of her meditation. The desire for the vision of God.
Yeah.
And we got a little bit of it in a nightlight.
Yes. It's because he's so good. Yeah. That's right. It's almost like this is all on purpose or something. No. Yeah, you know. No.
Almost like it's
well,
on
thank
purpose.
you both so very much for coming on. This has just been delightful, and I'm so happy to. And we have so many people who love to learn more about this topic, anything shroud related. There's definitely a real itch that these videos are scratching when it comes to this particular interest. So we're want to offer our prayers, of course, to everybody out there wherever you're at, and thank you so much for joining us today. So thank you both for coming on.
Thank you, Mike, very much.
God bless
Thank you.
I can't be more thankful to my gracious guests, Julie and Sheila, for coming on here today and sharing this beautiful testimony, this beautiful story about their dad's work, their involvement with this, and all that they're doing now to really, like we discussed, get the word out, help people to become educated about the Shroud of Turin, to see all the fascinating details that are there. Many of you who are watching this are aware of that. We've got viewers all over the world. Again, a special shout out to our friends across the pond. We're getting more and more viewers in the UK and also also across the other pond, the bigger one, the Pacific. We got some viewers overseas in the Philippines and some other places. So thank you all for tuning in to the Gracious Guest Show today. Remember, please subscribe to this channel. Like this particular video / podcast. Share it with friends, share it with family, and do not forget to check out letyourlightshineart.com. Again, letyourlightshineart.com. I've got the link down in the show notes. Go get some of these night lights, share them with your friends, share them with your family. It's a beautiful way to see the face of our Lord in dark places. So God bless you all. Take care, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.